I'm very pleased to welcome back my next guest. He's rapidly become a frequent guest, Patrick Bergy. Hello, Patrick. How are you?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Jason.
It's
Doing
lovely
fine.
to see you again, and you're looking very sharp today, Patrick, I must say.
Yeah, don't think it. I don't want it to become a habit or anything. So I like to keep the bar low.
Right. Well, we recall last week when you and I had a conversation, you were trying to put some funds together to get over to Washington, D.C., so that you might be able to attend the hearing that's going on, actually even still right now. For people who are watching who want to support Patrick in the future, Patrick has created a Patreon page. People can go to patreon.com/the ShadowNet and Patrick's been posting the videos that we do, as well as a lot of other information on there. So for people who want to get caught up on the story that Patrick's been sharing with us for the past few weeks, patreon.com/the ShadowNet is a great way to do that. You can also follow Patrick on Twitter. He's on there at PFC40book. People might recall that Patrick wrote a book about his experience becoming a private first class at the age of 40. And of course, his website is victimoftheswamp.com. Patrick's told us quite a bit about how he worked on the development of the ShadowNet and is now spearheading the American Awakening. Just real quick, Patrick, before we get into the Mark Zuckerberg hearing that's still ongoing, give everybody just a quick overview of how you came to be where you are and have the knowledge that you have and the things that you wanted to ask Mr. Zuckerberg today that unfortunately Congress is not asking.
Well, my background as an information assurance security officer and knowledge management officer with the Department of Defense for the last decade gives me a good understanding of how the sausage is made when it comes to cybersecurity in DoD and also influence operations and things of that area. I worked in that area quite a bit. I worked for a company owned by General James Jones, which is kind of one of the things that I'm pushing right now, right? Goes along well with the Hunter Biden issue. I worked for General Jones's son.
Yeah.
And I see sort of this small dynasty that nobody really sees building a power structure, much in the same way that Mark Zuckerberg's building a power structure right now with Facebook and the cryptocurrency testimony that he did today, right? So
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're looking at him with this, and they're saying, hey, what have you done to show us in the past that you could possibly manage something as big as this, something that could actually destroy our country? And when you look at the people that he's partnered with, which are the same people in many instances, with Facebook, with the Atlantic Council, while the person that I did the psychological warfare weapons that I built these for is the chairman of the board, General Jones, we've got Mark Zuckerberg partnering with them. So I, too, have a lot of questions on whether or not he or Facebook has the moral or ethical bankruptcy, shall we say, to become a bank.
Right. And this was the subject of a lot of the questions today. Zuckerberg was pretty adamant that Libra and Calibra and Facebook are not a bank, but a payment system. It sounds like he was prompted by a lawyer. Yeah. Not a bank, it's a payment system. Right? So what do you think about that statement?
Well, it's as ludicrous as it sounds. It really was. I found it to be quite interesting. It was painful most of the time because it was a bipartisan just butt kicking on one individual. It doesn't seem like really anybody in the Democrat or Republican Party went very easy on this guy. I actually almost for a bit felt sorry for Zuckerberg, but then I realized what he's doing, and he's there for a reason. They're just not asking him the right questions, and they're they're wasting time on a few partisan bits of politics, but I'm actually was surprised to see that that's not all that this was, right? It wasn't just a shout fest. It was some people had some very legitimate questions on the Democrat side and the Republican side, and one of the Democrats is actually has a background in artificial intelligence. Bravo. Amazing to have someone who actually knows what the mechanics are in this. I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy, right? A white hat or black hat, but it's nice to know that people on that committee were actually, some of them, a few, actually had a little bit of knowledge of what was going on, right? Because these are big questions that are going to impact everybody on the planet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're mentioning artificial intelligence. I observed a decided lack of intelligence. I mean, C-SPAN is a wonderful thing that people should watch because, joking aside, it really puts the ignorance of the individuals in Congress on display. Much of this really felt like kind of a teenager trying to explain the computer to their grandmother, like we've got this oversight body that has no clue about any of the facts and details or even the basic knowledge that they require to actually oversee what they've been assigned to oversee. Interestingly, this representative, Sylvia Garcia is also with Chewy Garcia. I found Mr. Garcia, is that his name, right?
Yeah, Chewy.
Yeah. I found his questions to be quite well thought out and good. Mm-hmm. And it was a contrast to most of the other people who were, as you said, it made me feel sorry for Zuckerberg because they were just rude. They were berating him, not letting him answer the questions. Whatever he said, they gave their answer. I mean, for me, it was more revealing of the shortcomings of Congress in these types of proceedings than anything to do with Facebook, Libra, or Zuckerberg.
Well, Republicans went at him pretty hard, but they actually did it in a respectful, professional manner, which is, I could really notice a difference there. Yeah. They were, okay, they have these issues. Actually, some of them even are siding with it. I'm not entirely against I believe we're going to have to figure out a solution for this. This is an inevitable thing that's going to happen, cryptocurrency and the issues that go along with that, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. So we need to have this conversation. But you're not going to have it in the way that the Tlaib woman had it, where she's answering his questions for him, right, putting words in his mouth, or AOC or Green with whatever he was going. I don't know what he had been drinking before that, but some his questions were completely irrelevant. He they fit in a few shots on the president, but they didn't really ask the real good questions. One lady did. The Presley lady, right? She started in on a good question about trusts and authentication. Mm-hmm. But then she went to the fact that, the problems with banking is not authentication, whereas people can't get IDs to go use the bank. It's that they don't have money to put in the bank. Well, I would say you've got to deal with both of those issues. Obviously, if you need money to put in the bank. But if you can't verify the provenance or the authenticity of the individual, the attribution of who that account belongs to, then the whole system breaks down, right?
That's the Know Your Customer law? Is that what that is, Patrick?
I don't know. I just say it's it's just the standard practice that you have largely with currency when you start getting away from currency, that handshake, right? Mm-hmm. Face to face. When you start getting away from that, then your odds on having someone commit fraud on you increases, and that's because that distance, that gap between authentication and knowing the provenance of the person you're dealing with gets larger and larger, right? The further you get from that handshake, right? Mm-hmm. So once you get online, your transactions could be taken in any of 1,000 different ways maliciously, and inherently someone's going to have to pay that cost for it, right? So we need to fix. We need to we need to deal with the situation, the authentication and security issues of being able to establish providence, right? Before you can just invent the cryptocurrency that's going to change the world. Like that one of the representatives made the comment, listen, you can't even manage, you can't even keep my emails secure. How are we supposed to entrust you with our money?
Well, we should
right?
ask Congress the same exact thing. I mean, what happened to all of Hillary Clinton's emails? So that's
true.
That's what I mean. It was like an interesting, like idiot on idiot conversation. Not that Zuckerberg is an idiot. I mean, he might be a smart guy, but it just seemed like theater, as we always see. I mean, they touched on some important points. And as you're saying, cryptocurrency, it's happening, whether these guys wanted to or not. It's here. The technology, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. There's other expressions that I won't go to, but the point is, this is like, I'm thinking about when George W. made the decision that it's okay to drop depleted uranium on women and children and people in Iraq, but do not touch a stem cell because that's a life and God wouldn't want anything to happen to that. Meanwhile, China, Korea, all these other countries have rocketed ahead of the United States in bioresearch and stem cell pharmaceuticals and things that probably could have helped a lot of people in America and certainly would have been a huge area of commerce that we were left behind. So there were people in this congressional committee who just straight up don't want Facebook to have digital currency. They want to regulate crypto and any kind of digital currency out of existence so that it doesn't represent a problem for the US dollar. But I thought that Zuckerberg raised an interesting and valid point in saying that if we don't do something like this, that China or someone, very probably China, would have their own cryptocurrency, and that this would be a strategic problem for the United States because it could allow them to defy economic sanctions. What did you think of that?
I totally agree. And I believe it was a Republican congressman asked him just right after that, what makes you think that you are actually, all those things being equal and agreed to, what makes you the person to do it, right?
Right.
And so that's the good question. It needs to be done, but we need to carefully think out how we're going to do it from a governance perspective. We understand already the IT component of it, right? Mm-hmm. The technical component of it, there's a solution. Nobody wants to talk about it. That's what the conversation has to be about. It has to be about what that technical solution is, and inherently, it's going to come down to sacrifices of what may seem to be sacrifices of constitutional privileges, right? So it's not going to be an easy conversation, because you're going to have to decide if you truly want to eliminate these things, if you want to eliminate or reduce online child sex trafficking, things like that, then you cannot ever hope to accomplish that just by an open, non-attributable currency. And tie, add to that encryption in the apps like WhatsApp and Facebook. Right. Now soon to be potentially encrypting Facebook Messenger. Those were astounding, shocking, at least to me, numbers that these representatives on both the Democrat and Republican side were talking about.
You mean the millions of pieces of content of child abuse?
The tens of millions, the 60 million plus, of which like 16 million was just on on Facebook's
Well, let's talk about this,
Messenger
because
app
it
are
was
18.
interesting,
But
and I thought that Zuckerberg had a great response. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as I recall, they said there were 18 million reports of child abuse images or child sexploitation images, and that 16 million came from Facebook, which sounds shocking in a headline when you hear it. Oh, Facebook is a den of child porn. But what Zuckerberg said that I thought had merit was that it's an indication that Facebook is most aggressively tracking them down, because I've seen people who are talking about child abuse images on YouTube and elsewhere. So that was pretty interesting, I thought.
but the catch to that number is the reason it was so much higher with Messenger was that the other one, WhatsApp, is an encrypted device.
Right.
So you can't tell. They're like, oh, it was much lower on WhatsApp. Just like illegal immigration's much higher at the border points. Well, that it's just because you're not counting everybody crossing
Right.
across, coming across where you can't see them, right?
Yeah.
So that's the problem. If you and you're not going to fix that problem. The only reason that the other one doesn't have like the other 80% is because you can't see it. And Zuckerberg made that comment. He made that point. They skipped over it. But yeah, that's the reason that the other numbers were so low, because you can't see it. And so that's the conversation that you need to have, right? You got, Tea Party patriots, you got libertarians, you got people that want unobstructed liberties and constitutional freedoms, right? And then you have other people on the other side that are going to be arguing, well, we got to protect, we got to have some sort of border, right? We got to have, it's going to be the same debate. It's either, it's, do you want to have a border wall and do you want to have a firewall? Because you got to have that attribution. You're going to, any cryptocurrency, right now it's great, everybody, because it's not in any way, shape, or form regulated. But once it does become regulated, and it's going to, then you're going to start running into the same, if not worse, problems, right? And that's what this debate was. He couldn't answer that when they asked him whether or not this would be attributable, whether or not, because, and you remember the comment that that one of the representatives made about how, well, that's why people who deal with cryptocurrency walk around with security guards, because if someone takes that money, they're gone.
No way to get
with
it
right?
back if somebody steals it, and they were comparing it to credit cards and things like that. I mean, it's obviously a concern, but you could say the same thing about cash, although a person's not going to have 10, 20, $50 million worth of cash on them. You could have it in a safe, you could have it in an ATM machine, you could have it at your house. So it's interesting how these conversations have a lot of back and forth to them. And I mean, it is a conversation that we need to have. It's just such a challenging conversation. I mean, the thing that was most clear to me, Patrick, when we're watching it, is that the whole congressional hearing seemed like a big waste of time. It seemed to not be, as you said, asking the correct questions. It didn't even seem to have the correct people questioning. It was literally a bunch of like dumb dudes and old ladies hanging out, asking questions about things they know nothing about. And it felt like a distraction from the other hearing going on today, the hidden hearing that Adam Schiff is holding, because the real question is, what is happening to the United States of America in this post-constitutional state that we're in? They did bring up the fact that Facebook's market capitalization exceeds the value, the GDP or the whatever they measure the value of a country, by like 160 countries in the UN are worth less than Facebook, and that Mark Zuckerberg's sort of single-handed control of the corporation and its influence over a billions-strong community make it more like a government than a company. What'd you think about that?
Well, they quoted the one Democrat representative quoted him as calling it himself a government after he had just said he would never call it a government.
Yeah.
But that's a serious problem. And the reason that you have, I think that this is actually the biggest issue that should have been focused on today, but instead you had the Democrats controlling the narrative. You had the Republicans reacting to a situation that the Democrats created, which is a closed door session, that they're not going to change, be able to affect or change, or at least if they could, storming the halls is not going to do anything, right? So you've got them taking the focus off over there, what I believe is a much bigger issue over here, because this could potentially change the world, the currency standard,
right.
everything. And we know the relationships that Zuckerberg has. Those would have been great questions. Maybe Zuckerberg is the perfect person to do this. He sure as heck needs to explain some relationships he has with the Atlantic Council,
Right.
going back a long time. Jones and other people that were also connected with Cygroup and with Wikistrat, which are still clearly he's learned nothing. A $5 billion fine from the Trade Commission,
Yeah.
and he's still partnering with the same associates from those two that were on the boards of those of the Cambridge Analytica scandal companies, directly tied to it, directly
Right.
under the indictment of that. So he needs to prove to me, and he's not doing a very good job. I'm gonna and that's just me giving him the benefit of the doubt. But I think it's a bad idea for the Republicans to just run around reacting to situations created by the Democrats, right? That's influence operation number one. That is the Russians call that reflexive control. You know how people are going to respond. So if you know they're doing that to you, try responding in a way that people don't normally respond, which is, I would argue, the basis of President Trump's success, right? He does not respond in necessarily the way that any type of predictive methodologies would be able to have come up with, right?
So basically, stay unpredictable is what you're saying.
Absolutely, because they are using predictive methods. They are using reflexive control is what the Russians call it. Google it if you'd like, right? So they're using what's called reflexive control, and that's because things are so predictable the way that they respond to them. And that's what I saw today when I saw the Republicans over there reacting to a situation that the Democrats created when they could have been over in the other committee asking questions that about Obama's ShadowNet to Zuckerberg, who has a direct relationship to the person who owned Obama's ShadowNet and built it and was, for the purpose even of affecting U.S. elections, right? So we could have had that conversation, but instead we had a bunch of taterheads running around reacting to influence operations designed by and put out by the Democrats. And that's what I see, right?
Wow.
And I think if you look back at how this day went from that perspective, you'd go, wow, they are just kind of, they look, what they looked like today? They looked like Democrats back in 2014, responding to every little thing that Republicans did to them, right? Mm-hmm. So they really did, right?
No, you're making great points. I'm actually, I hadn't thought of any of this.
I don't see how you can even do that and pull these up, by the way. Bravo. You do great multitasking there, Jason.
Thank you.
But I think people, if they look at that from that perspective, that is what I see. And I think I see a lot of these things just because of my background in influence operations. It's not like a tinfoil hat thing, although I'll probably be fitted for one day, right? But today I'm not, right? And these are easily verifiable things that should deeply concern everybody. That's what should have happened today, not this running around reacting to the Democrats' created situations of a locked door. They should have been having a conversation about that man's relationship to Facebook. Why didn't that happen, Jason?
It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question, Patrick. And you see, I was fooled because here I was thinking this is a big, stupid waste of time. They should be thinking about what's going on with Adam Schiff's hearing. But you're absolutely correct. And, you know, you've also put a very fine point. You've answered the question I was about to ask, which was going to be, tell us some more about the questions that you wanted to ask Zuckerberg, but you're telling us it's about his connections to the Atlantic Council, his relationship with Jim Jones, the guy who created Dynology, which created the ShadowNet. I mean, the reason I want to show all of these images is because it's important for people to remember how close this guy was to Obama. That first picture of him with Hillary Clinton, this is when Obama was the president-elect. Right? He had just been elected, and there's Hillary, and there's this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I went on to my next contract, selling where we actually licensed technology that we built on the previous contract for the government, where we actually licensed it back through Jones's company on a multi-million-dollar DoD contract back in CENTCOM as he was getting sworn into office. Right, so that's a little bit. You know, they give Ivanka crap about her shoes. They give Trump crap. They even brought the possibility of Trump making money from his hotel. Right. Yeah. They brought that up in this meeting.
Yep.
Now, had anyone brought up Obama's ShadowNet and its relationship to Zuckerberg and ClearForce, you would have cleared that closed session that they were having. That room would have cleared out. And every one of those people, including Nancy Pelosi, would have been sitting right next to Maxine Waters going, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Right? And we would have changed everything. It would have changed everything on that. And they look at that guy, right? They got doesn't he look like a Chinese military guy?
Yeah.
And all that is that's social credit score there. And one of the board of directors is with one of the big three credit reporting TransUnion's on the board. And they got TransUnion on the board. We got this former CIA, the former National Security Advisor. We got this Asian guy wearing a Chinese Communist star uniform, and it's all about a social credit score. That's not brought up at all during this meeting. I find that quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like, wow, we could have done that, or we could have stood out in front of the steps and bitched and whined like the Democrats did, when we held the House and the Congress, right, the House. So and we were having the Democrats, wow, we don't like this, right? They look weak out there instead of actually going for them and changing the narrative and making them react to, hey, you partnered with this guy who owns ClearForce. Is this data from Facebook being used to generate these Minority Report predictive behavioral profiles using artificial intelligence? Mr. Zuckerberg, I know that's a kind of a run-on sentence there, but right? Great question. As opposed to standing out on the steps of Congress whining. And every one of them, Matt Gaetz, I've spoken to him personally. Every one of those people out there we knows it. At least 5 or 6 of them standing right at the front, right in the front. The first several people to talk on the steps today with Gaetz and those guys and Jordan. We know Jordan knows it. I got an email from from a staffer at one of his offices 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago when I did, I think my first interview with you, right? And I had just gotten an email back from Jordan's staffer, and he said, and what did he say in that? And I posted his response. He said, "Hey, I'm forwarding your information to Mr. Jordan at his at the D.C. office." That was a month ago. why didn't Jordan come in there or have somebody pass that along and have somebody who was allowed to, if he wasn't allowed to speak in that committee, have them speak, right?
Wow. Yeah, it's a
So,
good
yeah,
question.
I posted throughout the day as I'm watching that. I just kind of find it humorous at times.
Yeah, I
You
really
couldn't
want
laugh,
to
couldn't laugh, you have to
encourage
cry,
people.
right?
Sorry, Patrick. I really want to encourage people to follow you on Twitter at PFC40book. Patrick is clarifying things that this just makes sense. I mean, this is important stuff. And you're helping me to demystify what went on today, because it sounds like what you're saying, and it makes sense. The closed door Adam Schiff hearing was almost a distraction from this.
It probably was. It probably was. We were reacting to something that the Democrats wanted. And if you don't think they plan these things out weeks and months in advance, then you've not been paying attention. You don't understand how these people work. That was one of the things that was the project management component of the ShadowNet, to be able to put together multiple operations at the same time, to have them be able to force a particular narrative and a predictive outcome, right? So, and it takes a lot of things going on at any one given time. Nothing happening in Congress is by accident, right? So
Right.
that I saw, and nope. It's just a real shame. And please, anybody out there that still wants to defend these people, that wants to, and I drove all over the state of Florida supporting Matt Gaetz's campaign, but you can be sure I'm going to be supporting anybody that's primarying him, because I'm sorry, I get it. You might like these people. They might say a lot of things that you agree with, but they are playing a game on you.
Yeah.
And I'm right there. I'm like a next person. I've got a front row seat to this game that Congress has been playing. I've had it for 4 years now, since I filed my original IG complaint against the son of Obama's national security advisor. So this isn't like an all of a sudden Trump's president thing. Let's write a book and get famous. This is hey, you guys screwed me over. I'm a little pissed off about this right now. And then situation, and then Trump wins, and he's like, hey, let's clean this act up, right? Let's clean the situation up. And I'm going, okay, well, this guy seems to get it, right? But he seems to be the only one.
It's interesting, Patrick, because I'm really lamenting today the fact that we were not able to put it together to meet in Washington, D.C., because even if you had just, I don't know, just any way to get this line of questioning into that room would have been incredibly important. So I want to remind everybody again, if you're watching right now, make your way over to patreon.com/theshadownet and let's support Patrick on there. It's really important that the guests I bring on to Crowdsource the Truth have our support, both emotionally and financially, because what Patrick is talking about is the richest people in the world creating the most powerful computer network that's going to have basically every piece of information that you voluntarily put into something like Facebook or whatever, combined with all kinds of other data points that they are collecting from our phones, from GPSs in the phones, from our transactions. I mean, we're talking about cryptocurrency and this Libra, and just think about how that would impact people's lives if suddenly every transaction that you do is tracked, recorded, and not just stored away in some data center somewhere. You're talking about a huge, almost unfathomable artificial intelligence that's taking, this is big data, right? They're taking all this data and doing all this analysis of every person and coming up with these predictive algorithms to try to create these scenarios where they can use disinformation and this concept of reflexive control to basically try to manipulate the outcome of essentially everything.
Jason, I think General Jones has had one or two visits where he was asked to testify on the benefits before Congress of 5G now, right? Twice. So they have a plan, right? It's not this, again, this isn't tinfoil hat stuff. This is a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander who's been profiting millions of dollars over the last couple decades while in uniform and while serving under Obama and many other positions where he had sworn an oath, and I personally believe violated those, right? And he was on. They did an interview with Jones on Fox the other day. Again, why doesn't Fox talk about this? I don't know. But okay, they're not talking about my story, but they are interviewing Jones, who's attacking Trump for pulling out of Syria. Now, hey, if I was just a normal person sitting at home and hadn't worked with these people and hadn't exchanged emails with them and knew what pieces of crap that they really are, then I would probably sit back and see a 4-star general and say, wow, I believe what this guy is saying.
Right.
But I see a guy who's so morally and ethically conflicted, I can't see how he can even with a straight face stand there and say the things that he's saying about decisions our president, who, yes, might be profiting from hotel room sales, while this guy is profiting from multi-million-dollar defense contracts and is now building a relationship largely associated to influence operations, but also very heavily in Saudi security contracts and such, black bag type jobs, right? So, and is this the guy who we should be listening to about Syria policy, or a guy that's been, or a guy like Trump that has not been in this all his life? I mean, we've been there almost 2 decades now. This guy has a really nice wine cellar. He lives in a mansion, and his family all drive the most beautiful cars, and they've got the 15th floor of the penthouse suite of the in Tyson's Corner, right? They have built an incredible operation of intelligence, of psychological warfare, and just multi-million-dollar defense contracts while in uniform as NATO Supreme Allied Commander, as Obama's National Security Advisor. Where are the ethics questions here, right?
Absolutely.
And we're letting and we're pulling him in front of Congress about 5G. What is next, right?
You know what I observe as I'm looking at this guy, Patrick? He's monoscopic. His eyes do not seem to coordinate. Have you ever noticed that in person in dealing with him? Does he have strabismus or a lazy eye or something?
My dealings were always with his son, Jim. Although he had the biggest office in the building, which was bigger than Jim's, who was the president's. His office was right next to Jim's. I never dealt with him. I've checked out his office. He's got a couple signed guitars by one of the guitarists. I can't think of his name, country western singer, and it, just beautiful place. And I get it, but what makes, just like they asked the question to Zuckerberg, what makes you the person that has to do this, right? What makes you the one that has to do the cryptocurrency that's going to potentially change the world? What makes General Jones, who served as a general because our elected officials in Congress gave him that authority? He's now using this authority that he was given, which is supposed to be limited and have controls. He's brought this into his personal life, and he has a lot of friends doing this too. General Hayden, all these guys, they get out of this, and they all have dinners up at the restaurant just above Dynology, and they all just make billions of dollars on defense contracts, and then
Spying on
get
us.
on Fox, News and say how our president's so wrong for wanting to leave Syria. And Republicans are just letting that happen. That's the most infuriating thing to me, because when I saw Jim Jones on there saying that we need to pull out of Syria, and I see a president that I voted for,
Jim Jones saying
standing
what?
up for
Jim Jones
saying that we
wanted to
need
pull out?
saying that we should be staying in Syria. I'm sorry.
Right. No problem.
And I see my president. Thank you for mentioning that. I see my president, who is struggling as hard as he can to keep, unbelievably, to keep a campaign promise. When's the last time a president's done a campaign promise?
Yeah.
And nobody's supporting him on this. Democrats are so just broken with Trump derangement syndrome. Fox News is going to keep putting Jones on there because Fox News is making a fortune off the military-industrial complex. They don't want these wars to end. So, who is going to stop this? If it's not Trump, we're screwed, because there is nobody out there that's going to fix this. If Trump fails, if Trump was actually just all a big bunch of bullshit or something, right? But if it was all just a lie with him and he didn't mean to fix it, then we're screwed.
Yeah.
Because there's absolutely no one that's going to do it.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think that they would be. I don't think they would be coming out so hard against Trump if he was, part of their plan. I think there'd be some other deception going on. I do feel that the deep state really hates Trump and wants him out of there because he's disrupting all of this, and we're seeing it get more and more intense. Whatever he says, he says this is a political lynching. They say he's a racist. So it's like, okay, even using the word lynching is racist now? Okay. So Trump, I learned earlier today.
Jason.
Yep.
By the same guy, by Biden, who literally used the word lynching during the Clinton impeachment. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just so two-faced. It's so, they're just making up whatever suits them in the moment. And I think it drives the public crazy to a certain extent because, we all want some real action, but they're sitting around in Congress wearing idiotic zebra hats, now that Ilhan Omar has gotten them to overturn the 181-year-old rule that no head coverings are allowed in Congress. It's suddenly become a fashion show for the ignorant.
Yeah. Well, we haven't seen any of the vagina hats yet, so we're okay.
That's next. That's coming next.
Knock wood there.
Yeah, I mean, the things that you're describing are deeply troubling, Patrick, because these are guys who go into the military, and we're all raised to revere people who make these sacrifices in their lives to defend the country. But when we learn that they're truly doing it for their own personal enrichment to create these companies that violate the Constitution, which they've taken oaths to uphold and to ostensibly risk their lives for, well, this calls the whole entire person into question. I would say they have no integrity, they have no morals, they deserve no accolades for being a military hero or whatever it is they claim to be. They seem to be people who are criminals who infiltrate those bodies in order to arrive at these positions where they can do these secret things. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, people say he's a puppet. I'm becoming increasingly interested, Patrick, in rather than just sitting here and saying, oh, the deep state this, the shadow government that, they did this, the CIA did that. We're talking about specific people taking specific actions. And frankly, doing that, identifying these individuals, is the only way that any of this can be unraveled, because what we first need to do is identify where and how is this happening. I was speaking to Ross Ulbricht's mother this morning. We did an interview with her. I don't know if you're familiar with Ross. He created the Silk Road and is serving a double life sentence.
Oh, yeah.
He was incarcerated at the age of 29, and he's now 35. He's a nonviolent offender who actually has, I mean, when you look at Mark Zuckerberg saying that there's 16 million individual pieces of child exploitation content on Facebook, And as a brief aside, as a computer guy, I bet you were just as suspicious of that number 16.8 million as I was. Very binary derived number. I think it's made up, estimated, or not accurate. And people who know about 24-bit color and binary numbers will know what I'm talking about. But the point is, Zuckerberg is talking about creating a currency, operating a network where all of this illicit stuff that's harming children is being traded. And the Silk Road that Ross Ulbricht created had none of that child pornography. There were other people selling some illegal items on there, and he was thrown in jail for life. The biggest drug offender on Silk Road only got 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they used his case, or their intended use for his case was to set an example so that it wouldn't happen again. But clearly, it happened again.
Right.
I mean, the dark web is it was a stupid thing to begin with that didn't have very much foresight to it, right? So no, they should have never given him. I'm familiar with his story. It was a pointless point that they tried to make, and it solved nothing. It reduced nothing. Right, and they did the same thing with the guys back in the day when they originally were doing like the MP3.
Napster, yeah.
Napster,
they didn't put him in jail for life, though.
No. But they hit him pretty hard, financially. But
that guy Sean Fanning is involved with Facebook, isn't he? He was the Napster guy.
I don't know, and I should know.
Yeah, let's see, Sean Fanning. Yeah. He was in the movie. I think it was Justin Timberlake. Mm. But this is the guy who allegedly created Napster in his college dorm room, and that was the first peer-to-peer file sharing platform. Interestingly, this is the same type of platform that Mega Upload was, that Kim.com, the German national in New Zealand, got jammed up over. What do you think about that?
I actually wrote some stuff about that in my laws and legal aspects of IT course, so I'm familiar with it, and it's all just like a Band-Aid anyway, right? It all boils back down to my argument of you're going to go down rabbit holes with these people because the internet was never designed to do with the things that we're asking it to do, right? Or the World Wide Web was never designed to do the things we're asking it to do. So you're going to get people like this that in Kim.com, he's an interesting character, right? I like interesting characters. Mm-hmm. But is what he's doing right, wrong? It's in the eye of the beholder, when it comes to like the licensing stuff. Right? So when you get into the licensing and content, certainly you don't want to take money away from the artists, but you've got this thing that gives us music for free, so why should we pay for it situation?
Well,
and
I mean, it's a little bit counterproductive. You've written a book, right? Part of the reason you write the book is to get the information out, but certainly if you couldn't earn any money from selling the book, it'd be difficult to continue spending your time writing books. And likewise, we may dislike Hollywood, we may dislike the music industry, we may say they're bad for XYZ reason, but stealing from a bad person doesn't resolve the problem, and certainly creating a network where you can illicitly trade movies, music, TV shows, whatever. The ultimate incarnation of something like that is that you remove the financial incentive for anyone to be creating that stuff, and eventually it goes away. So I think these networks that enable the capability to share things that are not your own property and intended to be sold by the person whose property they are really aren't the right thing to do. I think I would be disappointed if someone stole something that you or I did work on, and I worked on a lot of movies. I don't really like people stealing them, particularly, he wasn't just giving it away, saying, hey, everybody should have this. He was making millions of dollars from it. I don't think the FBI should raid his house with guns and do all that stuff, but I don't think what he was doing was legal or moral, and I'm curious why Kim.com has not released any of this information about Seth Rich. What is he doing to help Julian Assange? It would seem if he has some information about that, now is the time Assange is in trouble.
Didn't Assange say that if Obama pardoned Bradley Manning, that he would turn himself into the U.S. government?
I don't remember that, but he did not pardon Chelsea Manning. He commuted her sentence.
Well, she's free. He's free.
I think
right?
arrested again now.
Well, that's, that's on you. But as far as certainly not in prison anymore, right?
I don't know about that.
So you could argue that somebody didn't hold up their end of the deal on that one, which kind of would steers me towards some credibility issues. But yeah, he did say, and if you're gonna, I guess his argument has been since that he wants to nitpick certain points of the release, but he did release them. As much as that bothered me, I don't think that ever should have happened. But I almost thought for a second,
you don't think they should have released Chelsea Manning?
No.
You disagree with Chelsea Manning's decision, Bradley Manning's decision to release the footage of the helicopter shooting the journalists?
Yes, and I don't, and I agree with everything that he claims he justifies it from, because the rules were broken. But I believe
what rules were broken by who?
The rules for even allowing him to whistleblow were broken, right? So there was nothing in place that would have really prevented this or saw any sort of justice anyway, right? Mm-hmm. Which that's kind of what you want. You want to. There's two ways you can stop these things. Jones thinks if we create predictive models based on behavioral profiles that we can reduce leaks that way. I say best way to reduce leaks is by literally protecting whistleblowers at all levels, and where things are broken in that system, go in there and tweak and fix as necessary. And then you end up not having to have situations like what Chelsea Manning did, right? There are some things that the government probably has questionably had happened or gone wrong that just, maybe it should have been told, maybe it shouldn't. But it's not up to Chelsea Manning to decide that. We need to have another system in place for that to be decided, right? And if everybody just starts breaking a sworn oath because they don't agree with something politically or for whatever reason, look what we're dealing with right now with President Trump. I mean, there needs to be systems of arbitration within the government that are honest, right? That are not designed to crush the whistleblower for doing the right thing and protect the bad people. Unfortunately, it's the bad people that are actually making these rules, right? So they're not going to make rules that allow people like Chelsea Manning to stop them if they're doing something wrong, right? And not that was necessarily anything intentionally done. I don't think those journalists were intentionally targeted as journalists, right? So you start getting into the moral debate of, is releasing this information, is the damage that causes in a time of war, in the fog of war anyway, is the damage caused by the release of that information going to be greater than the good that releasing this information will do in something that was inherently just an accident, and accidents are going to happen, right? So there's a lot of debates that you can have with this. It's not clean It's not just clear and cut for me.
Right.
But we do have those two choices. We've got fixing the whistleblowers so that we don't have Bradley Mannings or we don't have Snowdens, or we let Jones
So
do
you don't
his
like
thing.
Edward Snowden? You think what Edward Snowden did was bad?
If he did it the proper way, he would not be in. And by the way, most of the stuff that he released, everybody knew anyway. And all it ended up doing, in hindsight, was allowing companies, people like Jones, to modify NISPOM laws that ended up just making a boutique services that build Minority Report-like behavioral profiles that are designed to predictively prevent Edward Snowden's, but in its own right has even a greater potential for malevolence than anything Snowden could have done, right? So I don't think that he could have ever predicted the outcomes. The ShadowNet, ClearForce, is a product of Edward Snowden. Whether you agree with what he did or not, because of the way that he went about it, that was exploited by these generals, right?
And so now they say, hey, if you've got an Edward Snowden in your organization, ClearForce will alert you to this high-risk behavior and catch the guy before he releases this stuff.
For a nominal fee. we might get a few, wrong people, a few innocent people caught up in these behavioral profiles, or we might reprogram these behavioral profiles to eliminate anybody that has a liberal leaning, or we might change these profiles, these algorithms, to profile people who support Trump, right? It just depends on which way the weapon's being pointed as to whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I think that's inherently a flawed way to look at it, especially if you have any intentions of actually fixing the problem, right?
It's, I tell you, Patrick, we've got to carry on with these conversations because you're dropping knowledge on everybody that's like mind-blowing and causing us to realize things that perhaps we hadn't realized before. You're speaking so clearly. I just don't know what can be done about any of these problems. We're getting close to the end of our hour for today. I do want to remind people that Patrick Bergy is joining me, and people can become sponsors of Patrick on Patreon by going to patreon.com/theshadownet-hacker. Patrick has experience working in interactive internet operations in the Army, and he went on to work for the Department of Defense contractor Dynology, which created the ShadowNet and this product ClearForce, which is a dangerous sounding behavior prediction what is it? Analytic tool.
A Minority Report minus the empaths. It's just replacing the psychic people with from Minority Report with artificial intelligence.
And as you've told us in past episodes, it's controlled by the same people who are hiding behind the Adam Schiffs, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, who are trying to impeach Donald Trump, because this is essentially the plug in the drain to the swamp. You remove this, and there's going to be, as Ross Perot used to say, a giant sucking sound. But it's a different
He said
sound.
it better.
He did say it. He did. He was good on TV. Well, Patrick, we're just about out of time for today, but we've got to have you back very soon because we're really just scratching the surface of this conversation. I really want to thank you, and I think people are appreciating that you're coming forward and speaking out about these sort of things. We've got to formulate a plan for how these questions can be posed to the appropriate people, maybe follow up with Jim Jordan or something like that, but this is a lot.
I'm going to be going out again. I've done a lot of speaking events in the past. I've got my had to get the rear bearings on my Harley fixed. Put a lot of miles on them driving around with boots on the ground last year.
Did you pay for them with pork bellies?
Yeah, right. But nope, had to pay cash. But so I'm going to be doing some more speaking events, and I'll be promoting the book. I'm a little over halfway through that, and I have some interesting conversations with some people coming up about potentially helping to publish the book, which would be very cool. And what I want to do is I want to be able to start this conversation. So if I can't start it necessarily through the use of social media, which these people do have a lot of control of. You deal with that every day. If I can't do it by that, I go out to these speaking events, generally related, like Trump related, and I'll get 100, 150 people at these events. I'm promoting the book. Once I get the book published, probably right after the first of the year, we're going to follow Bikers for 45, the boots on the ground Bikers for Trump folks, and follow the Trump campaign, right? And so we're going to be getting this message out, Jason. And I don't care if got to go around the journalists. We're going to be going campaign event to campaign event. I'll do book signings. I'll talk to people. They'll meet me, shake my hand. We'll have some streaming stuff that we'll be doing, and this message is going to get out, right? Yeah. It's frustrating as all heck, but you really helped me a lot with your suggestion the other day of starting the Patreon site, and I've been adding content to it. I added sort of what our mission was there, and any support that you guys can help with that will be great. It's going to, basically gas, data, and ink. Right, so it's a pretty simple, pretty simple mission there.
Yep, and people can find that at patreon.com/theshadownet and people should go over there and support Patrick. For my part, Patrick, I am going to be honored to help you in any way that I can on that tour, help you get the word out, keep doing these interviews, and I know everybody is looking forward each week to seeing you. So thanks for joining me again today. And we'll keep working on getting the message out.
Sounds great. Thank you again very much, Jason. I really appreciate all your help.
And thanks to everybody for watching. I'm going to be back in just an hour with Jan Irving, and we're going to be talking about social engineering. It's a busy day for me today, so I'll see everybody in an hour. Thanks for watching.